I am going to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And I do not see that we're on. Are we on? Wait, are we? Is Concord TV?
Yes. Well, you're on.
Yay.
They're on. You got
All
the
right.
thumbs up.
Okay. All right. We're not on this screen. All right. The reason I asked that is I just wanted to explain that people at home, even though we look like the city council, we are functioning as the finance committee for the city. And we will be functioning in that role for the next month as we go through sections of the city manager's proposed fiscal 2025 budget. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I should invite you over to my house to figure out my screen.
That's as far as
I understand. All right. And so, with no further ado, I'm going to hand this over to the city manager to begin his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Finance Committee. So I'll run through a PowerPoint presentation that is based on the budget and the budget brief that you received. The full presentation you can follow online if you would like to. It's on city's website, concordnh.gov. If you go to the government page, and so folks at home can follow it too live if they'd like. Under the government page, under the budget hearing heading, fiscal year 25 proposed budget. So it's there, or you can go to the city manager's webpage because it's really just a proposed budget right now. Under the quick links, there's the fiscal year, again, 25 proposed budget. You can follow right along as if you'd rather, instead of watching TV or YouTube or whatever be found. The full presentation can be found under that section under resources. So I'll run through that. And just as a reminder for new city councilors, this is called the yellow sheet. And the yellow sheet is used for if you have questions that you would like to have answered, just fill it out. You can fill it out online. You got it as part of your package. And the reason we have this is so that any question that you ask, we'll provide you with a written answer for. We also provide every other city councilor with the question that you asked and the answer that we gave. And also we keep the record of this for the public so everybody knows kind of what goes on. So you can do, so if something comes up to you in the middle of the night, 2 days from now, fill out a sheet, we'll work on the answer, try to get back to you as soon as possible with it, but we'll keep a permanent record of this, of what your questions are and what the answers are, so people know what it is.
So before you forget, and I love how you highlighted the new councilors, all the question we have tonight, we don't have to ask it, we can just fill out that form. That's okay. Good.
That's correct.
And where are the forms?
Okay.
It was sent as part of the pack, but
Yes.
I've got a whole stack right here.
Yeah.
If you'd like it, and
The
if
email.
you prefer it,
Oh, okay.
but I can,
I missed that we-
if you want a separate email on it, I can obviously give you a
No.
separate email on it.
And may I interrupt you and restate that in a different way? Here is the issue. Tonight, you are free to ask as many questions as you want.
Okay.
This is a good thing, yes.
Okay.
There will be time for city councilors to ask questions. But if the city councilor says you get home or later in the week, something comes up, you're going through the budget, we ask that you not send an individual email to the city manager or to a department head, but instead fill out one of these sheets, forward it, and then everybody will know the answer to the question. That way, we don't have to keep answering the same question 5 times for 5 different councilors. Councilor Kurtz.
Just a point of clarification, is there a deadline for submitting yellow sheets relative to our various meetings where we're discussing various parts of it or prior to the June 3rd meeting?
We generally turn them around in one day.
Okay,
But
so-
if it's a very, very complex question,
Right.
It may take longer than that, but we try to get it to you back for the
So
meeting.
submit them
Yeah,
as
for
we
the
think
meeting.
about them, and you will do your best, and.
That's right.
Okay, thank you very much.
But again, feel free to ask questions.
Okay, tonight.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ron.
Councilor Kurtz, Councilor Schultz, I'm sorry I do that.
Hey, that's nice. On the flip side of that, how long during this process can we fill out a yellow sheet for questions past today,
All the way to the last meeting.
which is the 2nd of June?
We hopefully will be, we hopefully, it's funny, I was at home, I'm told that it's hard to hear us, but here this is loud. We are scheduled to take a final vote on, if you look at your schedule, we're scheduled to take a final vote on the budget on Monday, June 3rd.
June 3rd, I got the date
Okay,
wrong.
so up until the week before June 3rd.
So realistically, you probably want to do something the Thursday, say before that meeting, because if you send it on a Saturday or Sunday, and the meeting's Monday, you might not get your answer in time for your vote.
Thank you.
So with that, I will, traditionally, I've done the presentation, City Council Finance Committee holds their questions because generally I ended up answering the questions that you were going to ask, most of them. So I'd ask you just to hold your questions until I get through this. It doesn't take that long. The first time I did it, it was about 2.5 hours. This one won't take that long. Much shorter than that, as I tried to hold this down. So I will go through this, and again, it's all online, so you can keep track. So the as you see, this is the first slide. If anybody wants to turn around, I won't be offended. You know, so you can watch it. Okay. So as stewards of the taxpayer dollars, hope you find the presentation helpful. It is an overview, and it's not meant to be completely comprehensive of everything, but it's really touching on the high points and some of the challenges that we have. So starting at the top, fiscal management, as you know, or I think you know, we do a bond sale generally in January. We get our ratings that time each year. Right now we're AA plus bond rating. That has not always been the case. We have certificate of achievement for excellence for financial reporting. That's the 28th year that we've received that, 28 years in a row. That's the longest streak in the state of New Hampshire. And we're also received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 9th year in a row, and that's the highest achievement you can receive in North America.
Nice.
So that, and the purpose of particularly that last award is for purposes of transparency and making sure we're providing information to folks so that they can actually have everything they need to make decisions and provide you with input. Looking at the total budget, you can see as you know, the recommended increase is a 3.89% tax rate increase. And again, this is a starting point of the budget. This is, you never adopt this budget, you always make changes. It's really just some place to get you started, and you can take it from here to wherever you want to go. In the fiscal year 24 adopted budget, which includes capital, and capital fluctuates quite a bit from year to year. It was $130.7 million, and this year it's $170.5 million. So that's a $40 million difference, and I'll explain what those are, and I can encapsulate, that $40 million in really four areas. And again, it's something you'll have to decide whether or not you want to pursue or not. Looking at that 3.98% increase, if you take a look at what the tax rate increases have been since 2020 on the municipal side, and you average them together, that average over all these years is 2.7%. So you've been able to achieve a 2.7% on average tax rate increase since 2020, even going through COVID and all the other problems that were achieved. So again, it's quite an accomplishment. Sorry, I went too far there.
2.7.
Yeah, what was the percent again?
The 2.7% is your average since 2020.
Oh, that's average, okay.
So if you take all those years, put them
Yeah.
together. So percent tax, this is a slide that the City Council has always been interested in, is where we stand in terms of the amount of property that is tax exempted in terms of the value. And generally, we're double every other community in the state of comparable size. And you can see we're at 23%. That number usually fluctuates between 23% and 29%. Just so happens right now we're on the lower end. You go back a few years, we were at 26, 27, 28, 29. And again, it's one of those things, and those other communities, so if you look at 2010, if you were to take the same chart, if I would show you the chart I did in 2010, Concord would be 25%, Manchester would be 13%, Nashua would be 9%, Portsmouth would be 12%. The other communities don't change that much, maybe 1% up or down. Concord does fluctuate quite a bit. And of course, being double, that's one thing the city council, the reason you want this chart, and the reason you've asked for this chart is you're very cognizant of the fact that every time you spend a dollar, it's even more impactful in Concord than it is any other place in the state of New Hampshire because of the amount of tax exempt value that we have here.
I would just have a quick question about that. I assume,
I'm going to do them all at the end.
oh, perfect.
So, yeah. So, looking at fund balance. This will take a little bit of time, but I think it's really important to understand this. The unassigned fund balance, so you can see in the green there, that represents the portion of the total fund balance that is spendable, not restricted for anything, and has not been committed or assigned for a specific purpose. Essentially, is the funding that provides the city with the flexibility to deal with emergencies or other unanticipated events. The healthier the unassigned fund balance, the less impact an emergency has on the city's finances. The unassigned fund balance is the balance that the rating agencies use as a key benchmark for the city's financial health. In January of 2024, Standard & Poor's affirmed the rating of AA+, which is a half a notch below the top rating of AAA. It's a very commendable achievement for the city, particularly giving some of the restrictions that you have compared to other communities. If you look at some communities that have AAA ratings, their per capita income is either double or triple what the per capita income is in Concord. That is one of the real issues for Concord to get to a AAA is because you're a city, and you're a city that really has a very vast difference in the amount of wealth that folks have compared to many AAA communities that have think Portsmouth. People have a very, very high average median income. So as we look at the unassigned fund balance, we're at 22.4% as of June 30, 2023. The goal is 18.5% and has been that way for a number of years. But you have to recall, since that budget was approved, we used $295,150 of unassigned fund balance to offset the tax rate increase last year. So you recall that when we were at the end of particularly at the last meeting, City Council decided to use undesignated fund balance to help keep the tax rate increase down because you added a number of things to this. Now, one thing to recall also, we made a number of expenditures during the year to drive that 22.4% down to 21.2%. You set aside $100,000 for the Concord Coach display on Main Street. The general services retention dollars that we did for the plow operators, that was $385,000. The fire department, the PFAS gear, that was $305,000. And the earned leave for the employees for that you just did a few months ago, that was $66,000. You put them all together, it's $856,000. So that comes off the total of how much balance that you had. And then what we were also able to do is use additional rooms and meal tax that you received last year at the end of the year to help keep the tax rate down. So there's a number of things in play. So even though the number is 22.4%, as of June 30, you've used some of those dollars as time has gone on. So that number is down a little bit, but it's still in a very, very good position. Looking at budgetary use of fund balance, which I just touched on, you can see how it varies from time to time. In 2021, you used 1.5 million. In 2022, it was down to $1 million. In 2023, is 495,000. Last year's budget was 1.1 million, and now it's down to 561,000. So when you've used it in the past, the direction you've given me is it's okay to use it a little bit, but then as time goes on, you like to get off of it, so to speak. And that's what you've been doing. As you can see, you start using some of it and then work your way off of it, and then the next opportunity comes around where you might need to use some. Looking at motor vehicle registrations, and the reason we use this chart is because this is your second highest revenue. It doesn't change much from year to year. If you look at the 23 actuals, that's $7.4 million. And then the 24 estimate for this coming year, the second bar from the right, is about 7.7 million. And we're estimating in this year's budget about 7.8 million. Looking at rooms and meals tax, the actual in 2023 is 3.8 million. The revised budget and estimate for 24 is 4.1 million, so that's up about $300,000. And the amount that we're using going forward is pretty much flat for that going forward, just a slight change. Looking at highway block grant, you can see, if you remember, in 2023 and 2024, the state had surplus dollars, and they made those dollars available to communities on a formula basis. So our number, which is traditionally around high $800,000 we get for highway block grant, you take those highway block grant dollars and obviously use them for road programs and costs. So you've taken those dollars in the past that you've received, those additional surplus dollars from the state, you put into the highway reserve, then appropriated them out and made more road projects happen those years. As you can see, this year we're back down to the normal amount. I'm not aware of any other dollars coming unless there's some sort of major surprise coming on, this summer for extra highway dollars. If it is, that would come to you. You would have to decide what to do with that at time, but we're not counting on any for that. Looking at investment income, this is a fascinating number here. You can see right now, let's start at the left-hand part of the chart. 2023, the actual was 1.5 million. If you were to go back one bar to the left of that, instead of being 1.6 million, that 23 actual, it was 82,000. And the year before that, it was 60,000. And the year before that, it was 613,000. So it fluctuates anyway, and I've seen it as high as even a decade ago or 15 years ago was 1.8 million or so. It really tracks along with a couple things: the interest rates that are going on out there, and the amount of fund balance that you have that's available to actually accrue this interest. Not fund, but the balance in all your funds. So for the revised budget for 24, we're at 1.3 million. For the 24, so you budgeted 1.3 million, it's going to come in at 2.2 million. And that's what we're budgeting for this year, based on what we see going on, is about $2.25 million. Looking at total budget overview, just so you can see how those dollars are allocated, the 2025 general fund budget proposes a $4.8 million increase. The 2024 increase, to put that in perspective, was 3.7 million. So 3.7 million last year, 4.8 million this year. The capital projects, as you can see that large green section over there, it proposes a $33.4 million increase. The increase in 2024 was 1.9 million. So I mentioned earlier that changes dramatically depending on what you're taking on as far as capital projects. And looking at property tax rate, this is another thing because we're the only community that has two different tax rates for our community. You can see the Concord rate is 2686 for this includes school, city, and county. The Pennacook rate is 2915. If you look back at historically how this changes, Concord School District, for example, was 53% of the tax rate in 2010. In 2020, it was 53% of the tax rate, and the last year it was 56.5% of the tax rate. So it's gone up. Merrimack Valley School District was 58%, went to 62%, and at 61%. So very simply, if you're in the Concord School District and you pay your taxes, 35% of what you pay in your taxes goes to the city of Concord for us to cover what we cover. If you're in the Merrimack Valley School District, when you pay your taxes, 33% of your taxes or of what you write goes to the city of Concord. The rest goes to the county and to the school district. If you look at what a 3.89% tax rate increase has on a $350,000 home, it's $130. That is what the average home would pay in additional taxes that's valued at $350. And of course, you can prorate that based on the value of your house. Looking at what city taxes pay for, generally it is fire, police, general services, and debt service. That is, if you really look at what property tax, the amount we collect in property taxes, it covers those costs predominantly. And the amount of taxation excluding overlay and veterans credit, so that's $51.4 million. Looking at the general fund overview, This is how the general fund is broken up. You can see you have general government, public safety, the largest section, 41%, general services at 15%, community development, leisure services, and health at 1%. Looking at that a different way, you can see it's really made up of the blue section, the way over on the right, that's compensation, and then benefits is the 27%, the orange on the bottom, and then you have outside service supplies, and debt service is there in the sky blue, the 10%. Now we'll get into some of the specific major notable changes here. Compensation, if you look across, this is general fund, what we're talking about. Notable changes, based on the contracts that you've entered into, there's an additional cost of $1.8 million needed to be raised to pay those contracts. Based on the increases in costs for health benefits, dental benefits, that required an additional $1.5 million. The use of fund balance is up $286,000, and debt service increase of what we need to pay for additional debt service based on improvements or they've made in the past is $598,000. A 1% tax rate increase, you might want to write this down. A 1%, even though Brian already gave this to you, a 1% tax rate increase generates $524,930. So if you think of that 1% term, you get about $525,000 each time. We're under contract with all our unions right now. The New Hampshire retirement system employer costs have increased by $360,000. Remember, those go up every other year. So that's 4.6% increase in retirement costs. So that number is now $7.8 million that we pay into the retirement system. The general fund debt service is up $598,000, as I mentioned. And we're proposing to increase the use of fund balance, as I mentioned. Looking at some of the major projects, funding for the design of the new police headquarters is included in the budget at $3.4 million. Police vehicles are used in the marked fleet for 3 years and then transferred to the unmarked fleet for 2 years. That was $280,000. The transfer to the highway reserve for paving is increased funding by $152,000. This is your enhanced neighborhood paving program. We've tried to increase that as time has gone on every single year, dedicate a little bit more dollars to that so you can keep up with the road paving. These funds go to capital paving program, which in this year is proposed to be $2.9 million. As we began to include last year, sidewalks are included. As we're doing those streets, we're doing those sidewalks at the same time. In this case, it's $113,000 proposed to Cold Plain Overlay and Shim Overlay sections of Old Turnpike Road sidewalk sections. Funding for the demolition of the existing airport terminal and the construction of the new terminal building is proposed at $4.3 million. This will be funded through the use of federal and state funds and airport general obligation bonds. So you're going to see there's a number of places throughout the budget that are not general fund, that are not paid for by property taxes. The airport generates its own revenue and its own expenses. So in this case, the airport will pay that share of the match for the federal and the state grants. So in this case, the airport bonds would be cover about 27% of the cost of the project. In addition to funding for the replacement of the parking lot, which is $800,000. Again, the airport helps pay for that parking lot at the same time. Looking at the parking lot, there's federal and state funding compared with airport general obligation bonds. When it comes to the parking lot, the city side portion of that, the airport portion of that, is about 5% of the total cost for that project. Replacement of fire engine 5 is recommended in the amount of $1.1 million. This replaces an engine that was put into service in 2016. Improvements to the Heights sewer collection system are recommended in the amount of $16.9 million. 6.3 is proposed for the construction of a pump station improvements in the Steeplegate Mall area, both funded with sewer general obligation bonds to support economic development and additional housing growth on the Heights. Again, sewer bonds, not general fund dollars, not property tax dollars. They're paid for with the sewer costs, with the sewer revenues. So also, as part of that, the east side is generating a lot of sewer. $950,000, nothing personal. Includes $950,000 for improvements to the Mountain Green Pump Station, $500,000 for the East Concord pump and grinder replacement, so that is what you think it is. So that will, those are all sewer bond requirements, again, it's not general fund. Looking at next set of projects, the water rate recommendation increase is 7.75%, and we'll look at those individually when we look at those pro formas, and you could decide whether or not that's the appropriate rate and the appropriate way of handling the fund. The water is 7.75, the wastewater is 8. And of course, those are driven by 4 things. It's really compensation, chemicals, electricity, and the capital investment. And if you picture, both of those plants are getting really to the age where we need to put large amounts of capital improvements into them. The 7.75% water rate increase on the average home, that's $2 to the average home per month. The wastewater rate increase is driven by the same 4 things: compensation, chemicals, electricity, and capital. 8% increase equals $3.36 a month for the average homeowner. The planned opening of the Pennacook Library and Activity Center will occur in September this coming year, 2024. Additional funding in the amount of $186,000 is set aside for that, and I'll break that down for you and look at those when we look at each individual department. We have additional library staffing for the hours associated with that. It's $89,000. Condo management fees, remember we're a condo part of the Boys and Girls Club there, so that is, to manage the common areas, that's $10,000. Park and recreation staffing, because the park and rec will be using that space too, that's $65,000. And then we have a contracted cleaning contract to actually take care of the space when it isn't in use, and that's $23,000. And with no additional general fund ARPA dollars available for the 25 budget, we're recommending $561,000 unassigned fund balance, so that those ARPA dollars that we've applied on a regular basis for the last couple of years, at least the last 2 years, has been in the amount of about $900,000. So that revenue is not there anymore. So the question is, how quickly do you want to fill that hole? My recommendation is fill it partially this year with under the fund balance, and then slowly again work your way off.
Does everyone understand what ARPA dollars are?
It's the federal dollars that came to each of the communities. So, for example, the city of Concord got $4.5 million. Portsmouth got $12 to $16 million. Manchester got $44 million. It's a formula basis on really the same thing they use the CDBG funding for. So we only got $4.5 million. You decided to use it to help offset to cover, Brian, how do I want to say this?
Use it for wages and other operational costs.
There's a technical way you have to say this, otherwise they come for you. So, so that's why I had Brian say it, so they can come for Brian. So that's
There's no restriction to it?
Pardon?
It's not restricted?
Not for the city, not for us.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
the investment income here is likely to exceed $2.6 million this year. So, and that is really based on the reason that we're in that good situation. We've made a very strategic approach to purchases and maturity dates of certificates of deposit, and we make sure we're turning those around in the proper way. Brian and his staff are handling all that, and of course we're looking at reductions in the Federal Reserve interest rates in the first 2 quarters coming up. So we're trying to measure that. That's why the number is not. We don't see the number climbing. We see it staying the same or maybe going down just a little bit. In the last section of this piece is funding for human services program is recommended to increase $130,000, and that's primarily for rental and housing assistance. That's where we see the demand for what people need. But also there's a recommendation here for increase in staffing from one staffing position from a part-time to a full-time position, because the demand is so great, the number of people at the window, the research that we need to do to help folks, we need just a little bit more. And so I'm recommending one of the few staff positions I'm recommending that be increased. Looking at the neighborhood street paving program, it's $2.9 million. Again, you can see down the bottom of that slide, from the general fund transfer, so money comes into the general fund and we transfer it to the highway reserve. And fiscal year '24, the current year we're in, we did 1.4 million transfer. I'm recommending an increase of that to $1.5 million, so you can keep up with the road program that we have. Looking at Manchester Street, these are the several projects that I thought you'd be interested in. Funding to relocate private signage to accommodate utility relocation is recommended so we can prepare for the construction of Manchester Street. So there's that whole section of Manchester Street that needs to be done. We have done some property acquisitions. We need to move some signage so we can do the utility work. And remember, this project is a very, very large capital project, but 80% of it is going to be funded by the state. So it's good for us to get. And if we want to be in line for make sure those dollars come through, we need to have our pieces done. The citywide recreation center improvement funding includes $575,000 for the replacement of the Garrison Park pool, $20,000 for tables and chairs at the citywide community center. We didn't buy all the tables and chairs we needed. When we built the center, we went right into COVID. We saved some money. We weren't sure how often it was going to be used. Well, it's used all the time now and the demand is there, so we need to buy some more tables and chairs. And $15,000 to install 2 bocce courts, outdoor ping pong table, and a cornhole facility at Keach Park for the folks out there to have some fun. Proposed Merrimack Greenway Trail total is $221,000 for an engineering study, preliminary engineering, and environmental permitting for the section of the trail from the Sewells Falls Road to the Boscawen Town line. And of course, we're working to make sure we can acquire all that property and get that section done. There's an 80-20 split, 80 federal, 20 city, and of course that would be paid for by general obligation bonds. There's $100,000 for the proposed design and permitting work for the renovations of Bicentennial Square. It's getting quite old. If you've been through there, you've noticed the brickwork and the lighting and everything needs to be changed. And $10,000 for the design of the Green Street sidewalk from School to Capitol Street in conjunction with the legislative parking garage. So essentially, we'd like to be able to lower it because so many people are crossing the street to get to either City Hall or get to the library. Would like to actually make that a little bit safer across that section of Green Street. And with the big additional amount of cars that will be out there because of the state parking garage, we believe it's going to be a little more congested. So we want to try to make that safer. The White Park, $203,000 proposed for the full depth reconstruction of the basketball court and new fencing repairs, and the retaining wall needs some work at that site. And again, this is a period we're going from park to park to do the courts. Cemetery improvements, we need to undertake improvements to the vault, again, where we hold folks temporarily, at Blossom Hill, to repoint the brick and the granite walls and replace the roof. It's leaking down on our clients. Kiwanis Park.
Are they complaining?
Are they complaining? No, but it's hard to, well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Don't get, yeah, I can go off track right now. Kiwanis Park final design. So the current fiscal year included funds to move to final design for park improvements per the 2023 plan. The funding is pending acceptance of grants and donations, and that would come back to you. It would not be appropriate as part of this budget. It would come back to you once you're okay with the design and how we're actually going to fund the improvements out there. The budget proposes a second portion of a 2-phase project to do a full measure and list analysis for all the properties in the city, and the project is recommended in conjunction with the city's Board of Assessors in the state of New Hampshire, and the $10,000 tree program that the city council put into place last year on an annual basis is funded this year and every year going forward. If you look at the capital budget. There we go. Okay. Golf course improvements. In order to continue improvements to the greens and fairways, funding is budgeted for the next phase of the irrigation work. That's $403 in general fund, general obligation bonds, and capital closeout funds. There's also a parking lot proposal expansion to expand and replace the existing parking lot. That's $900,000, and that's in golf bonds. That's not in the general fund. That's paid for by the users of the golf course. Parking. The replacement batteries for the smart meters, there's 463 of those need to be done, and we need a few backup batteries just in case. That will be paid, again, that's paid for by the parking fund. Information technology includes hardware replacement throughout the organization, replacement of end-life servers, printers, software upgrades, and replacement of the fire department apparatus on the mobile computers and all their pieces of equipment. That's $70,000. There's $60,000 recommended for the library auditorium chairlift to replace that at the library. City Hall improvements include $250,000 for City Hall campus plan. So if you do decide to go, even though I know it's been reported by some that you've already bought the new property for the police station, you haven't, don't worry, I'll let you know when we get to that point. But if you do decide to move forward, or we do move forward completely with that, there's money here recommended to actually take a look at the existing City Hall campus, particularly the existing police department, and see how best to reuse that property. There's $75,000 for Phase 4 of the masonry improvement to City Hall, the south side, so that's the side with all the ivy on it, which is right there. And as you can see, we're just finishing up the one in the front. I think the staging came down today. And $50,000 for the fire alarm upgrades for this building, the Green Street Community Center, and the City Auditorium. $24,000 is recommended to replace the exterior book bins at the library. The funding for the book bin up at the new Pennacook Library is in that project, so there'll be a new book bin there. The Concord Municipal Airport, there's $4.3 million proposed for the construction of a new terminal building and $800,000 to replace the parking lot. Again, that's the federal, state, and the airport will be paying for that. And this is expensive but necessary work. Funding is included for the design and construction of the Pleasant Street, I'll do this slow so you can imagine this. Pleasant Street, Green Street, South Street intersection in the amount of $550,000. That would replace the existing traffic signal equipment, including the mast arms, the controller cabinet, the countdown pedestrian signal, the accessible push button station, and the video detection system. We'll also improve the sidewalk corners, the geometry, and all the graphics that go along with that, the pavement graphics. $100,000 is proposed for the signalization intersection improvements at North State and Booton, and North State and Pennacook Streets. That's to come up with a design for those. $60,000 is proposed to upgrade the traffic signal management system. $25,000 proposed for the study for the signal warrants and the determination of either the removal or replacement of the traffic signals at Pleasant and Spring intersection over by the courthouse. We'll take a look at that and determine whether or not what needs to be done there. And $25,000 to install new signal controllers at the intersection of Manchester Street and Old Turnpike Road, South Main, Water, and West Streets, South Main, Stores, and Pearly Streets, and those are estimated about $8,000 each, and those are all general obligation bonds. You can see how the capital budget grows very quickly here when you're trying to get, particularly a lot of these public safety improvements. Looking at stormwater improvements, $500,000 is proposed for the design of the Burnham Brook culvert, which would be under any future extension of Whitney Road. So we'll take a look at that. And that'll be pending the outcome of feasibility study. So again, that'll be back before you to take a look at. There's water geo bonds, general donations, that'd be meaning money from other parties, and potentially tax increment financing funds if you want to go that way. Looking at water, plant and tank improvements, we need to replace 8 fluctuator units, that's $80,000. We need updates to the supervisory control and data acquisition system, master plan supply study, the cleaning, crack sealing, and altitude valve refurbishment for the Snow Pond tank, that's the water tank. Design for booster improvements on the area northeast of Portsmouth Street per phase 3 of the water master plan, that's $100,000 right there. Land acquisition for the same booster station for $80,000, and the implementation of an asset management system for $90,000. That would all be paid for out of the water fund, not the general fund. For the wastewater plant improvements, includes $4 million refurbishment of dewatering equipment and replacement of the conveyor system. This is the Hall Street. Structural and concrete repairs for $530,000. Refurbishment of the tank mixing system for $300,000. Replacement of the aeration system diffusion for $75,000. Pavement repairs and minor structural concrete coatings. Again, that's paid for by the sewer fund. Storm sewer improvements, sewer separation work at Pennacook Street and Cross Street. That's general fund and sewer mix, because essentially you're taking a combined system and breaking them apart. The water meter replacements, there's the phased installation of meters and reading devices, so we have 600 of those units to replace. And we need to replace the gate valves. Again, that's paid for by the water fund. We have 2,800 linear feet of 10-inch main to replace on School Street. School Street from Rome Hill to Westbourne, that's $550,000 for the water fund. And the wastewater main and pump station includes construction and collection improvements. These are the big ticket items. For the Heights sewer system, $16.9 million. Construction of the pump station, as I mentioned, the Steeplegate Mall, Mountain Green, and the East Carcket pump and grinder replacements. We have general services equipment replacement. You can see that number there. For dump trucks, sidewalk tractor, utility pickup trucks, other equipment, and it's funded through various sources. So if it's water vehicles, paid for by the water fund. If it's sewer vehicles, paid by the sewer fund. The comp improvements, where you need to replace overhead doors. That building's starting to get old now. And there's 57, it's a good trivia question, there's 57 doors at the conf. We're in the process of replacing 28 of them. That's what those dollars are for. We're also working with the school district. They would like to do a concept design for the their bus maintenance upgrade. That's $35,000. So we work with them and they help pay the cost for that. And that's funded across the water and wastewater and general fund.
Does everyone know what the COMF is?
I
No.
don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
There's an acronym, yay.
Combined Operation Maintenance Facility,
I see.
up just past the prison, or
Yeah,
City Hall North, as they like to call
The
it.
sheds, formerly known as the sheds.
Because
The
we are-
shed, formerly the shed, which used to be, right before it was there, was over at Concord Stables.
So please, city manager, do us a favor. When there is those acronyms, just define them, because you said to wait for the questions, so we were not even going to ask.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to.
So again, it's combined operation,
Maintenance Facility.
thank you.
You're welcome. So then the next piece, the design of the new police station. We've talked about that, and there's also 200. So part of this number is also 240,000 for the weatherization of the building. So if we were to buy it, when we buy it, then you would seal it up and wait for the work to begin. There's a cost issue. That includes cutting the grass. That includes the fire alarm system, security systems, and everything else that goes along with it. Police communications equipment replacement includes $120,000 for communication system improvements, ballistic vest replacement program, patrol rifles, computer crimes investigation work, and that's general obligation and capital transfer. Capital transfer is cash that comes out of the capital budget. The fire EMS replacement is phase 2, the replacement of the cardiac monitors and associated equipment on all fire department and police department vehicles. So there's 30 of those AED units that are located on each piece of equipment, and this is phase 2 of that. You've already funded phase 1 this year. This is for next year. The fire department breathing apparatus, so that when they go into the fire itself and go into the buildings, that is the last time we purchased those was 2015. The cost for that is $915,000 for all that gear. And the replacement of thermal imaging cameras is $60,000. Fire station improvements, we'd like to do cleaning, descaling, and repair the sewer lines at the Manor, Central, and Broadway stations, and to replace the original heating system up at the Heights. That's $115,000. Bridge and dam projects, you may recall, the city maintains 20 bridges and 14 dams, and we're including $305,000 for structural repairs and design for the Horse Hill Bridge over the Kentucky River. This includes bridge deck joint replacement, new membrane, pavement replacement, and this is all pending results of our bridge deck testing program that we funded this year. We're getting close. I promise. We have EV charging stations. In this current fiscal year, you approved 2 EV charging stations at the water plant. We're recommending for this coming year 2 at the wastewater plant. We're also working with, as you know, as I think you know, Kearsarge Solar for the construction of solar arrays at the Old Turnpike Road and at the Hall Street wastewater treatment plant. And when that comes, we'll have payment in lieu of tax payments, net metering revenue that comes with that, and lease payments that comes with that. We're also working on the LED street replacement program. We're looking for some grants. We haven't been able to find it. But if you can picture a lot of the lighting that's on our bridges, again, we maintain all the bridges, that is very old mostly non-functional lighting. We would like to move all that to LED systems too. So we're looking for that, so we'll be working on that, particularly when we're going to be having the Loudon Road Bridge replacement going on and all the work that the state is doing as part of 93. The Trails Ranger position is funded going forward. And that's it. So, now, the end comes quickly.
Are there questions for the city manager? Council Keach.
I had a couple. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, with regard to the ARPA money, the funds that are remaining in those accounts, number one, is there an expiration date as to when they need to be spent? And number two, where do they end up, in the surplus, or are they in a reserved account that's special for ARPA?
I'll let Brian come up. He's our ARPA expert.
Night at the ARPA.
It's the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we received. We received $4,500,000 and change. And over a 3-year period, the first year we allocated a portion of it to the general fund, a portion to a number of other funds. The second year we allocated a portion to the general fund, then another portion to the parking fund. The other funds had already received their full allocation. And then this year we received the final allocation of the $899. So all the funds have been allocated, or all the dollars have been allocated to the appropriate funds to make up for the full $4.5 million. Because the city is an under $10 million community, so what we qualify for is just a revenue replacement program. So when we do that, then we're allowed to use the dollars as just a general operational costs and operational wages for the community, for the city. And that's what the council chose to do back when they appropriated money 2.5 years ago. So there's not really any dollars still left available. Those funds have been allocated in our revenue stream. At the end of this year, those funds will be fully expended through our expenditure programs. So there's not any funds remaining after this year. So everything has been allocated and spent as of fiscal year 2024.
So just as a follow-up, Your Honor?
Follow-up.
So I guess the question I should have asked really is, so there really aren't any ARPA funds being used to backfill holes for this coming budget?
Not for fiscal year 25. Right. That's the reason why we're using more funds from use of fund balance, to help offset that loss of the $899,000.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council Brown.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, if that's all right.
I'll let you go. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thank you. So the first is, I remember when we did this last year, we were not using, there was no use of fund balance, but you just said we used 1.1 million. Is that we used 1.1 million over the course of the year?
At the end, do you remember when we got to the last night of the budget? That's how you increase expenditures without increasing taxes.
I thought we, right, but I don't think we spent, it was at 1.1 million the last night?
No. It was
295,000.
295,000. Over the year, you spent money out of those accounts. Remember, I had gone through that list of items. You would spend money out of those accounts to pay for things without going back and increasing taxes, because you had an excess amount, a reasonably good excess amount of dollars in that account.
Follow up? And so that.
You get 3, Council.
I know, but that's a follow-up to the first one. Follow-up to the
Right?
first question is, so that increase, was that from the investment income? Because I think we were not quite at, or we had dropped down to like 18% of the.
So, some of it was some of it, but actually the largest part was all the vacancies.
That's what increased the use of funds?
Surplus. No.
Surplus.
What happens is you have all at the end of the year you have a surplus, and then you take those dollars and they go in, they come into the fund.
Job vacancies. Is that what you're talking
Job
about?
vacancies, yes.
Okay, you said yes. I was thinking
Yes.
housing vacancies.
Oh, no.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
that's what I was
all those
confused.
positions that have been open over the years, and of course, what goes with that is not only the wages, but all the benefit costs associated with that, too.
That's what it was. Thank you. Second question, Your Honor,
Yes.
is debt service. Last year was 120,000. This year it's 598,000. What is that massive increase from?
That's all the things that you bonded the previous year.
Okay, all right.
But the amount of debt based on June 30, 2023 is 9.4%. So your goal is 10 to 14%. So the reason you've engineered that number, I'll give you credit here, the reason you engineered that number is because you knew that there are going to be some major expenses coming forward, capital expenses, so you wanted to be in a very good position to be able to move into that.
Okay. My third question, the water rate and the wastewater rate increases. So those increases, that goes into those funds. So when you talk about these expenses, it's coming from those. Now,
Right.
it's a significant increase this year from last year. Last year it was 4.5 for water and 5 for wastewater, and this year it's 7.7 and 8%. Is that to support these major
Yes.
capital improvement projects?
Yeah, so when you look at the individual performance for each one of those funds, you're gonna look at all those capital expenditures and see what particularly, because this is really capital driven, what those principal and interest payments will be in future years. So you have to decide when to do the rate increases so that you know you have the proper funds in those, or balance in those funds as you go forward. So that's when you have to decide. So you could have done the increase last year, but you've always tried to not do the increase until you absolutely have to. And in this case, you want to make sure that you're keeping those balances in the proper place in case something was to come up. Like remember we had the issue with the screw pump went down and it was $800,000, $900,000. You have to come up with all of a sudden.
Right.
And whether you can buy it, you can use cash, but whatever the thing is, you still got to make the payments when the time comes. So.
Follow up on that question?
Follow up?
So these increases are being paid by current users for the future development?
It's one way to look at it. In reality, is what happens is everybody's at one time was the future development as it comes along. So every time you have to, so for example, when we went from, you don't have to go back that many years. If you lived in the south end, you had the odor control issues down there. You don't have odor control issues anymore because you did a lot of major capital improvements to take care of that. What happens is everybody pays for that over time. So you're at the point now, and particularly regarding wastewater, you're at the point now where you can support the existing development that's out there, maybe a little bit more, some of the things that are coming along. If you don't make improvements to those, to the wastewater system, whether it's the lines themselves or the pump stations, you'll be out of capacity. So essentially, all the housing that's projected to occur, or the redevelopment of anything on the heights, you'll have to say no, thank you.
Right.
And a lot of communities have done that in the past. They've said, our plant is full, our lines are full, we can't accommodate any more development. In this case, you have plenty of capacity at the plant. It's getting the materials from that side of the river to this side of the river.
Follow up, Councilor Brown?
So we could do what other communities have done and pause on that to allow developers to contribute to those funds, to help pay for the wastewater and water that they will be using. We could.
Well, usually what happens is this development just stops. People don't contribute to that. Because they'll contribute on where their project is, but they're not going to contribute all the way from, say, Steeplegate Mall all the way to Hall Street. So, but that's a decision the council has to make.
Okay, thank you.
Set?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for the city manager? Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned that our tax exempt percentage is so much higher than other places, and I'm going to guess that that's because of state property, the higher number of nonprofits that are headquartered here, and does that also include those that qualify for exemptions for property taxes because of age or what other status allows one to become exempt?
That's true. I think if you took, you're on the right track. If you took all the state property, then added all the federal property, and added all the county property, and added all the school property, 2 schools, and then added state forests, things like that, and then you went into, things like, you can really keep going, we have a tremendous amount of property because it's such a large community. Again, you could fit Manchester and Nashua physically into Concord. We have a lot of property that's in current use, so you're not generating really a lot of revenue from those. You're not generating the demand for services, but you're also not generating the revenue. So you have a lot of, and then you add on top that we are really and actually, if you kind of look at the way the demographic have changed, the number of churches that we have, and we're really, a lot of churches have gone to a regional model that you don't have the same church in every single community anymore. You have it in a major community and everybody comes here, as you would know. So, so that you start pulling all that value out, and all of a sudden you don't have that tax revenue coming in anymore. But you have the demand for services.
And so the other part of that question was about those that qualify for exemptions. And I'm just curious as to the nature of that for, you know, residential property owners, who qualifies for exemptions?
So
And how is that involved in this percentage?
So we take a look at we take a look at what the value, this is really more, doesn't include a lot of that. This is really more associated with properties that are simply tax exempt in and of themselves. It wouldn't be that you get a veterans exemption and you get a elderly exemption, you get a blind exemption. This is more of the property itself as a whole.
Interesting. Thank you.
Other questions for the city manager?
I'd just like to,
No,
follow up with what Councilor Brown mentioned relative to sewer. The capital sewer is a lot of money, and in some communities, I believe that we mentioned the development on the Heights. I'm curious, is the amount of money in the sewer fund, is that derived solely from for user fees, or does the city assign an assessment if someone would come in and say, build, you know, let's say I'll call it on the north side of Loudon Road between the mall and 393, when all of that was developed, were there any sewer assessment fees assigned to any of those properties part of that development?
Betterment fee or something
Yeah.
like a better, yeah, you, in the past, when the city put in the sewer lines, all the utility lines to go up to, say, the Steeplegate Mall, there was betterment fees associated with that, and as people came on, they hooked on and they paid portions of that. I think most of those have been taken care of so far. There might be a few pieces left out there. I'm not sure. Matt has an idea of how many and how that's changed over time, because there's so few that are left.
Yeah, there's been a rash of development on the Heights. There are still some parcels that are left. Back when the mall was built in 88, 89, 90, there were sewer investment fee districts, water and sewer investment fee districts that were up there. And in fact, the previous council a few years ago, I think, did away with those altogether. So they had been there. The rationale was that the debt that was issued for those extensions back in 88, 89, 90 were paid off, and so the council did away with those investment districts.
Because the debt was gone.
Right, now we're,
New
the
debt.
sewer users are looking at a substantial amount of capital improvements as part of this at this point. So we do not realize any revenue for, say someone wanted to build 1,000 apartments on the Heights at the mall, hypothetically. And so there's no sewer assessment assigned at this time for that development, if there was such one.
There's no fee beyond what they would pay for their connection fee, which is tied to size of meter, which is a significant fee, but it's not like a sewer investment fee that would be above and beyond that connection fee.
You're not taking the total cost of the project, dividing among 20 properties, and recollecting all the money that you invest. Right? It's not like that. Right? There are other ways to pay for things. Right. As you know.
Thank you.
So what are those ways?
There's taxes. Because you have the growth that occurs. There's betterment fees districts that you can create.
Good.
There's tax increment financing districts that you can create. That's something the council has to make a determination about how to do it.
I think I had Councilor Brown and then Councilor Fennessy.
So I'd like to follow up on what Counselor Foote said and then add another question. That's okay.
Sure. So you have
So,
questions?
Yes. Follow up to what Counselor Foote said. Could we do a betterment fee district during this budget season? Is that possible?
You'd never get it done in time for the budget, but you could do one this year.
Okay, great. That was just my follow-up. And then another question I had is I noticed the different park improvements, and I'm just wondering, when we allocated funds for the design and construction of the Keach Park lights, and I think there's only been one public meeting, are those dollars are still allocated for that?
Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I was just clarifying that.
Capital budget dollars stay there and go from year to year. Your operating budgets expire on June 30, so the dollars are not allocated by then they expire and you have to reappropriate the dollars if you want to use them again. But capital stays.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank
Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. This might be just a point of clarification. When we're talking about the funds that you are talking about for the capital improvements with respect to sewer, I guess the big price tag is to replace essentially a line that already exists. Is that fair?
Right, yep.
And the idea, if I can follow up,
Follow
and
up.
the idea behind it is we've got an existing line, but we want to increase the size of it so that we can get more
Effluent.
Very sure.
effluent. Yes, thank you. From the east side of the river over to the wastewater treatment plant.
And that's true of the pumps. Same thing with the pump station. Yes.
So, one more.
Follow-up?
So it'd be fair to say, what we're talking about here is not actually an increase in size of the plant at all, or increasing, lines to places that didn't already exist. We're simply trying to upsize existing infrastructure.
Right. If a line needed to go to some place that didn't exist, then you would have to approve that. But that's generally the developer pays for that. We don't run lines all over the place for folks, unless you decide you want to, like back in the 80s that you did. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown, do you have another question?
Follow up from your last comment.
We have a special on questions today. Go ahead.
Well, I'd just like to kind of get more. You said that we don't put in lines, but that one on, you were talking about acquiring land for a booster pump station. Those would be new lines. Is that correct?
When I mean new lines, I mean like if you had a piece of property that we did not provide a line that went to your property yet, we wouldn't do that. You would do that at your expense. But if we have a line, so if we have a line that's going by and we need a new booster station, we need a piece of property adjacent to that line to be able to put that station in there. So it's not like we're taking. So it's not like somebody wants to do a 20-lot subdivision and we're going to run the lines up there for them so that people can have access to that. No, they will do that at their own expense, at their own cost. Same thing with a commercial development.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kurtz and then Councilor Keach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to understand the distinction between running a line to somewhere where there's not been a line and the developer paying that cost versus a decision to update a line that is existing and hypothetically only needing to update it because of anticipated development. Is that distinction driven by an ordinance? Is it just the way it's been done?
Sure.
What's the precedent or the history of that distinction?
Sometimes it's you're upgrading them because you're anticipating the increased demand for capacity. So, for example, when we did a lot of the road work up in Petticook, we knew that a lot of the water lines were 6-inch lines. Well, it's really hard to do a lot of hydrant work and with 6-inch lines, so you go to an 8-inch line, right? So while you're in there and while you're tearing up the road, you want to make sure that you're upgrading that line at the same time. So you do that. Now, will that support additional growth in the area? Maybe more homes, better capacity, better pressure in the second floor so people can expand? Yes. But you anticipate that when you're doing it. But in that case, it was a public safety thing. Other times you're doing it because you just have growth going on in certain areas where, if you can picture, it's like it's like your internal system, right? You need to make sure that it's sized properly all the way through, And you could get to some areas where the system was put in 30 years ago, and some issues, it was put in 50 years ago, and they don't match up. You can go from a 10-inch line to an 8-inch line now you've got a clog. Start thinking of my heart right now when I'm doing this, but it's that type of issue, so.
May I follow up?
Follow up?
So, but the new lines somewhere versus updating lines, I understand why we would update lines,
Sure.
but who foots the bill for it question is a judgment call, it's a legal distinction,
Oh, it's your call.
it's our call,
It's your call.
okay, thank you, that's all I was trying to
Yeah, you can simply say, it is what it is and no more, yeah.
thank you.
Councilor Keach.
Your Honor. Mr. Manager, I just want to be clear, because there might be a little confusion, but the proposal to expand the sewer up on the heights, that's in no way predicated on a proposed school that's going to be built up there, but it's instead predicated on existing demand and
If we
what's
look-
going on now?
Right, if we've taken a look at all the different properties that are undeveloped up on the heights along Loudon Road, Old Loudon Road, 106, everything on that side of the river. You also have properties along Pembroke Road, and all scattered all throughout. And how are we going to collect all that material that's over there and get it across the river and down, in some cases, to Manchester Street and across? And so we've looked at that whole system and seen different types of improvements that we need to make in a bunch of different sections. And that's what this all, in culmination, that's what this project is to set us up, just as we did set us up 50, 60 years ago for today, we need to set us up for the next 50 years, essentially.
So this decision is based on existing conditions as they exist today?
Right. And looking at the build-out, as you look at the build-out, what could occur out there, what are you gonna need? So,
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilor Schultz?
Thank you. So you have a sense of how many places that exist now don't have sewer service, I imagine? Because someone had mentioned that in one of our hearings, that they didn't have sewer, and they lived in your ward, Ward 10.
Yeah, there's some places where the city is somewhat unique. It has what's called an urban growth boundary. And the urban growth boundaries has properties that are outside of that boundary, which we will, based on determination by the city council, we will not be running sewer and water to. So for example, where I live over on West Parish Road, in my section, there's no sewer and water. And I don't ever anticipate there'll be ever sewer and water there. It'll be too expensive to ever do it. And the idea for that is you were trying to preserve, this goes back to the 60s or so, you were trying to preserve open space, and you were trying to densify areas and maintain reasonable utility costs going forward. So you wanted to limit these, and a lot of it's limited by geography. How many booster stations you need, where the rivers are, the high areas are, where you can put water tanks and whatnot. And because of all that, you have areas that we will not get water. So that could be over in some of Ward 10. But there are other areas that are along already our sewer and water lines that are undeveloped. And eventually they will develop. And when they develop, if they develop as 4 homes, no big deal. If it's a Costco, probably not a big deal. If it's a 600-unit apartment building, you got a whole different matter, right? Because all of a sudden you're generating something that's very different than, 4 bathrooms at a Home Depot or something like, So it really depends on the use, what you're going to get out there. A lot of, when people looked at the heights in the past, a lot of it was commercial and industrial uses. But it turns out that it seems to be turning towards much greater opportunity for housing. And housing is the highest generator. Unless you were to get a Coca-Cola or a Stonyfield Farm yogurt or a Hood plant, which generates a lot of material like that. We don't have anything like that. So could, but we don't right now.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown?
Thank you. So clarifying, so I want to follow up on what Councilor Schultz said. So this is expanding for future developments in the urban growth boundary, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The Burnham,
Follow-up?
a new question.
New question.
The Burnham Brook culvert, I'm assuming that is in support of the Monitor Way project?
No.
It's not?
No. We have a water line out there that is in that area, which needs to be maintained properly. And the idea is someday in the future, the city council said, we envision the Whitney Road being extended someday. So if you're going to do this, if you're going to handle this culvert properly and protect that water line that's out there, it makes sense to do it right now in anticipation that you're going to need a crossing. Whether the Monitor Way project ever happens is immaterial to this project. You need to do this anyways.
Follow-up?
So this is strictly in anticipation of future growth.
You don't want to spend money now and then have to tear it out later when, 10 years from now, if that's the case, when you have to actually build a crossing there. You want to do it right. So what we're doing is doing it in a way that's a little more expensive than it would be if we're just fixing the water line, but it does anticipate what could happen in the future. But we don't know what's going to happen in the future. You may decide that you want that to all to be open space for forever, but you still need a crossing there. You still going to need to have some way to get from Whitney Road over to the other side.
Mr. City Manager, would it be fair to say that that water line is somewhat in jeopardy because of the current condition of the culvert?
It's very fair to say it's somewhat.
In other words,
we have a temporary fix.
Right, so this is a temporary fix to make sure that water continues to be available in that area.
Otherwise, we won't be able to have any more development occur at Exit 17.
Oh, correct, thank you. Councilor Brown had a follow-up, and then I'll go to Councilor Seckler.
No, I just wanted to build on what you said, and I'm sorry, Councilor Brown, because
Councilor
I
Brown,
think...
do you concede the floor to Councilor Seckler?
Of course.
All right, go ahead.
No, for me, just because what you said, we are not going to talk about development without improving what is needed before the development comes. So I think in the long run, as you were saying, it's very important to put the infrastructure there ready so that when the time comes, we are already ready. So it's really an investment for us in that regard. And on top of that, some of the lines are already needed. So I think the Heights has been a place where we see there is room to develop, and to do so, we have to invest in it.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Is this area, could it possibly be a betterment fee district? That
Which area?
the water, the culvert, could that be something that?
Yeah, you could make any area, sure, a betterment district area. You could do it with any infrastructure. I've seen people do it with roads and sidewalks and utility lines and all kinds of other things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Schlosser and then Councilor Seco.
I have two. So 2.9 million for paving. How do we think about paving? Is it a 20-year job? You repave roads every 20 years, maybe some roads more, some less. And are we on pace to sort of take care of what's needed with this kind of investment? Yeah.
It's usually in this area of the country, it's about 25 years.
I see.
You want to be spending. This doesn't include any work for bridges. So, and we do have major capital projects that are outside of this. So, for example, when we did Main Street, when we did Route 3 North, when you've done Loudon Road, things like that, that would be in addition to this. Excuse me. But the number probably really, when we started putting this together, we figured about, we needed to get to about $2.5 million, $2 to $2.5 million. That was probably 7 or 8 years ago, and the price of paving, the number should probably be about $3 million now of what we're doing to stay on a 25-year program.
I see.
We're catching up. So, but it's better today than it was last year than the year before that, to do it all at once. And I should interrupt myself and say, in the past, sometimes you've done bonds on this, but the problem with the bond is by the time you finish paying the bond, the road's done, right? It's time to do the road again, so you really haven't got that far ahead. So the idea with this, when we put this program together, was if you can pay for it in cash and not bonding, eventually you get to the point where you're on a 25-year road program and you would get all the roads replaced. There are roads in town that haven't been paved in 40 years. There are roads that have probably been paved 15 years ago that probably need to be done again.
I see.
For example, we paved Bog Road 3 years ago, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
3 years ago. And that was just the base course. We need to put the finished course on now. The way you were able to do that, when I mentioned the highway block grant money that came from the state surplus, you had $900,000. That's what it cost to pave Barn Road, $900,000. And you spent all that money that was like a dream, and then it was gone. And now we're gonna have to spend another $900,000 to pave it again. So we're getting closer, but it's gonna take a number. We need to keep going on this.
May I?
Yes.
And the EV chargers at the wastewater treatment, what are they for? Who are they for?
We'd like to start moving our vehicles to EV
So for
charging.
city
Yes,
vehicles, it's for
yes.
city
Right.
vehicles?
We think it'd be a good example for us to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why we're working with the school district up at the Combined Operation Maintenance Facility and other places. But we'd like to start moving our vehicles. We've looked at doing hydrogen, we've looked at other opportunities in
For city vehicles.
And
Thank you.
there might be grants out there available to do that. That's what we're trying to do.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Second.
Thank you, Your Honor. You stole my question because neighborhood street paving have been something that many of my constituents has been asking me. They say, oh, it has been there for 20 years. They say we will get there. But to see we budgeted 2.9 million, almost 3 million, that was my question. So thank you. That covered that. My next question is, I think, of course, we understand that budgeting and using the money is two different things. We can budget something. So if somebody call us and say, hey, I saw that you guys have new police headquarters design for 3.4 million. That doesn't mean, because they will say the taxpayers cannot afford this. Budgeting doesn't mean it's already done. It's just saying that if it's ready to do, we are budgeting 3.4 million.
This is if you budget the 3.4, if you pass the dollars in there, then we will move to the point where we'll actually do the design. We'll hire a consultant to do the design and come back before you with that design and say, here's what we're thinking, here's what this should look like. And then when you get to the point where you say, that's a good idea, we're in favor of that, what does that cost? We'll come to you with what it actually costs, and you would have to decide, as the city council, of whether or not to go forward and build something.
Okay, so this is already this 3.5.
Follow-up question?
Please, thank you. So this 3.5 million, if this goes, the budget is done. This is already part of the design. We don't have to vote on it. It won't come back to the council anymore until you get an architect or whoever the design. So it's more like an update because the budget is already there.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions before the city manager moves on to the next part of his
Next part of the
presentation?
meeting, that's right.
Councilor Foot.
Great question, Councilor Schlosser. I can tell you that in other communities, between 23 and 24 on road projects, other communities have realized a 22% increase from one year to the next. So I think the manager's being very modest with that. Going back to my original question about assessments, the hypothetical I brought up, in other communities, if there was this assessment, the users may not be realizing the amount of increase that they are realizing now, because other communities do assign assessments to projects. For example, 1,000-unit apartment, single bedroom in other communities would generate, in some communities would generate more than $1.1 million, which would offset this increase that we're talking about today. So I think those are things that we need to look at for, for the enterprise fund and also for our general budgeting practices.
You've looked at that in this count. Well, some of the members were here today. For example, when we looked at doing Manchester Street, and then the city council decided, well, let's move to the Route 3 North project, do the Route 3 North project. You looked at it based on a linear foot along the entire section of Manchester Street, try to figure out what those improvement costs would be, and try to then work backwards to be, okay, what is it going to cost for those improvements? Because the people who were receiving the improvements were, right there along the street. Then the question gets back to, okay, what about the people who are there, then the next road back? And, so it's you got to make some decisions on things. But yeah, you've looked at these things in the past. You've done them in the past. So.
Would you like to move on to the
Sure.
next part of your presentation?
So the So the way we've done the budget hearings in the past, you've gone through a presentation, and then for the sections of those budgets that are heard that night, you've asked your questions, and then you open up for a public hearing at the end. That way, anybody who comes that night can give any testimony they want. And sometimes most times people give testimony based on what was on the budget, what was discussed that night, but sometimes this is the only time they can be here, so you've taken testimony for that in the past. I assume you want to still pretty much go the same way. It's worked in the past. I don't see any reason to change it. Really where you want to start now is if you have your iPad, you want to go to tonight's meeting, which is this, obviously the 16th, and you want to go to item number 4, which is titled Schedule, Transmittal Letter, and Budget in Brief. I can wait for anybody to... Okay, is that okay? So look at this, and you don't have to go too far, and the attachments are included in there, the budget and brief is in there, the transmittal letter and everything is in there, so that's just a basic understanding. Does anybody have any questions about that? That's pretty straightforward. It's just some text, really. Okay, so going back, now you want to go to item number 5. And item number 5, if you open that, and you want to go to page 32.
Just popped right up.
Okay, everybody there? Okay, on page 32, 37, I'm just going to do this very briefly because I've been told not to read the budget to you. So 32 to 37, and these are the revenues and expense summaries for each of the funds by function and then classification. So you can see at the top of the page, revenue by function, right? Function by function, and then go a couple pages, 34, you see by classification. And then on page 33 of the last column, so you don't have to go too far in, you can see that the total expense budget for all funds, including capital, down the bottom, right-hand side, $170,470,336. The amount is $39.8 million more than the fiscal year 24 adopted budget. So you can see these columns. You can see the actual 24 is adopted. If something occurred during 24 that you made changes to the budget, that's the 24 revised. And then we're giving you our projection for 24 is 24 projected. And then 25 is what you'd be voting. So the 29.6 million of the capital, again, the capital increase is 33.4. 29.6 million is for what you've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. Wastewater Fund Heights Sewer Main Rehab Project and the Wastewater Fund Pump Station projects. That's a big chunk of that capital increase. And I'll go over the budget changes by department and fund in more detail as I go through for that. Next, if you keep scrolling forward, or to the side, I should say, you're going to see the organizational chart. That's continued on page 38. And the remaining pages, 39 through 46, looks at the staffing by department. So you can see all the changes of all the staff positions, or actually there's not many changes, but you can see where they are. And until you get to the notable changes are on page 46. So if you go to 46, you can see the changes in general services. We've talked about some of these in the past at last meetings. They're really eliminating some positions, creating new positions, but it essentially averages out. We talked about the community development. We'll talk about that a little more in depth when we get to community development, but it's really a civil engineering project manager replaces a permitting systems coordinator. Library, we added people for library because of the Petticook, Parks and Recreation because of Petticook, and Human Services, I mentioned to you that we went that part-time person to a full-time person, and that's it. That's all the staffing changes in the organization.
In the city?
In the city.
Thank you.
You want to take a question?
Yeah, sure.
Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question about page 33, the budget summary expense by function?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a question at the bottom. There's a difference in the 2024 revised versus the 2024 projected for capital and other funds.
Yes.
it looks like there's a difference of about 15 million, 16 million. Do you see that between the 30 and the 14?
Right.
What is the difference there?
It's the capital funding on the project. So a lot of times we'll put projects forward that the grants don't necessarily come through. So things don't happen the year that we think they're going to happen a lot of times. So if we put something in there that doesn't actually materialize, you just carry it forward to the, as we mentioned, the capital doesn't carry forward too much. So, because you don't know necessarily when that grant's going to come through, when we're going to get dollars for the Merrimack River Greenway Trail from the state or the feds or any project like that. So that's a big part of it.
Follow up. Was a portion of the difference in the revised versus the projected the Loudon Street Bridge?
I'll have to ask.
Or Loudon Road Bridge, I should say.
I wasn't going to
One by
correct you.
Fort Eddie? You're talking about the one by Fort Eddie?
I think
Yes.
a portion of it was the design of it.
Yeah.
It was a couple $1 million worth of design. So there were a number of other capital projects that kind of came forward.
Yeah.
We could get a list for you if you want.
Yeah.
But that was one of them. And they just kind of add to it is stuff that the council does through a supplemental appropriation, during one of the regular council meetings throughout the course.
Okay. What's that?
I won't go through all those changes. Okay. So overall, the budget provides for 2 additional full-time equivalent irregular employees for 2024, and I've talked about that. For those are full-time equivalents. Next on page, we'll slide back up to page 47. You can see this is a graph of all the full-time equivalent employees by fund. General fund, wastewater, water, all special revenue funds. Combined special revenues are your golf course, your arena, the airport, solid waste. Under the graph is a chart of all the temporary positions and all the seasonal positions, the full-time equivalent. So if you take all those little pieces and you add them all up, it comes to 34.99 full-time equivalent positions. And to make up that 34.99 you can actually see is set 270 people altogether. So we have everything from assessing support to city clerk. So the 148 for city clerk is, remember, all those election officials who we end up bringing on to help. We have people with the general services, with people with community development. So that gives you a full picture of all the employees we have and how all that works. Glad to answer any questions that anybody has on.
Questions on that?
So is it,
Councilor Second.
is it fair to say that our most expensive things here is really staffing in this case?
Yes. Yeah, when you look at, for example, police and fire, it's 92% compensation for police and, for the wages and compensation. It's a little bit less for some of the other departments, but really for those departments, it's staffing. You'll have less, say, for human services, because we do a lot of aid out to folks. But yeah, again, we're a service organization for the most part.
Yeah, because, follow up. Thank you. Because most of other projects we can apply for grants or we can apply to improve, but when it comes to staffing, it's really part of what we have for expenses.
That's why I mentioned a lot of times that when you're doing a lot of the park projects or you're doing bridge projects, there's a lot of aid that comes from other organizations to help pay for that, or matching grants with staffing if there isn't. It's generally general fund or those individual funds.
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
So you'll want to go to page 48. And this is your resolutions. This is what you'll be voting on. And what we'll do is you'll see new resolutions at the end of the process as we make changes to these. So the far right column is titled Fiscal Year 25. The total general fund budget is $83.2 million, or an increase of $4.8 million. And that's a 6.2% increase in spending. Again, you can see we're still on 48, you can see the war service credits and the overlays remain the same for 2025. The total use of funds and overlays is 83.7 million. All other revenues, not including taxes, total 31.8 million, and it's an increase of 2.1 million since 2024, and as you can see, the 2024 adopted to the left. Anticipated assessed value for the city is 5.2 billion. This includes an estimated 52.3 million in a new assessed value of real growth. That's a very strong growth for the city compared to previous years. That's all the development that you see going on in the community that is taxable.
Mr. City Manager, could you explain what overlays are for some of the members who might not be familiar with that?
Sure. So we keep an overlay because if you can picture when we put out the values on that, people can obviously come in and request abatements for that based on what their values are. If we have measurements wrong or we have something wrong, and primarily a lot of it's commercial, but it can be residential, and they'll come in and ask for abatement. And if we need to do an abatement to somebody, it comes out of overlay for that cost. We'll pay that cost out of there. We try to be very, very careful with this number and make sure our values are very good, because when we pay, even though we only collect, as I mentioned, 33% of the revenue, say you use the Concord School District area, we only collect 33% of the revenue that you pay when you pay your tax bill. When the overlay, the abatement needs to be paid, we pay 100% of the abatement back. We don't go to the school districts and say, oh, we need your 2/3 to make this. We end up paying the whole thing ourselves. So again, that number goes from year to year. Sometimes there's big abatements, sometimes there's not big abatements. So that's why, depending on what's happening with values of neighborhoods, depending on what's happening with values of certain types of housing or certain commercial uses, this is fluctuated a lot, particularly during COVID.
Councilor Sexton.
Thank you, Your Honor. So in this case, when it comes to revenue, many of the places like nonprofit churches that don't pay, and some of them do pay because we have a deadline to apply. Sometimes you don't project that in that because they don't pay taxes. Okay. So if they miss to file and then they have to pay,
yep.
How that revenue that we didn't count, where do you guys put that funds?
That would go into the general revenue.
Oh,
goes
it goes, okay.
But let's say you overpay. Let's say somebody overpaid by $100, and they discovered that, and we discovered that, and we had to write them back. It generally would come out of overlay. You'd write a check back to somebody for that.
Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. Can you just explain the concept of real growth and how that differs from market growth?
So market growth would be you have your home and you bought it, you haven't made any changes to it, and it went from $300,000 to $310,000 in value. That's market growth, because of the property, the neighborhood has increased, improved. You cut your lawn this year, versus you didn't do it last year. Whatever the case is going to be. Real growth would be you put a porch on, and or an addition on. We come out and say, okay, that addition is worth, pick a number, $50,000. That adds to your value. We don't get generally $50,000 value if you cost you $50,000 and put it on. Say your value might go up $30,000. That $30,000, your home is no longer worth $300,000. It's worth $330,000. That $30,000 is real growth on that. So it could be everything from an addition, an improvement, to a brand new, commercial Dunkin' Donuts goes up, and that would be new growth. But if that Dunkin' Donuts goes up and it's $1 million, and 2 years from now it's worth $2 million, that's market growth. That's not real growth.
Fennessy, then Councilor Schlosser.
Thank you. And so how does growth, whether it's real or market, impact the tax rate that we set?
So if you have real growth, you're bringing in new money, right? That wasn't there before. So a new home comes in that it was paying X amount of dollars. That was just vacant land. Now it's paying 10x. That additional money comes in. That's new revenue. That it comes in. The city collects those dollars, and of course it goes to schools of the county and pays for increased services that go along with it. If the market value just goes up, so if everybody's home here increased the same amount by 10%, your tax bill doesn't change much at all, because everybody's value increased the same. Your homes are all worth relatively the same as it was before. But if your home goes up 30% and your home goes down 20%, you're gonna get a higher tax bill, you're gonna get a lower tax bill because the values have changed. So what we're looking for is, it's great to have market growth go up, and that's the thing is, neighborhoods change at different rates, types of houses change at different rates, hotels change different than restaurants, everything's changing at a different rate. So when you layer that all together, you end up getting new numbers for folks as it comes up. But the greater the value of the community, if you go from a $4 billion community to a $5 billion community, it doesn't necessarily mean your tax bill is going to change, because that could just be all market growth. It's when you get new real value that comes in that can change things. Now, your bill could change from my bill, but the overall the amount of money, if the market changes, if everybody's value goes up 10%, the city doesn't get 10% more money. The city gets exactly the same dollar, or the county or the school gets exactly the same dollar. It's only when the real growth goes up that the value goes up, that additional funds come into the city. So just because your everybody's home goes up 40%, doesn't mean the city gets a penny on any of that.
Councilor Schlosser.
And you commented that the 5.2 billion assessed value has increased a fair amount. I mean, it's a good amount of increase.
That's a healthy increase in the new, the 52.3 million in new assessed value. So that's the new growth, and that's real growth. That's new development that's gone on. So
Is that on this page, 52.3? I mean, no, you're just reporting it. I see. That's real growth. That's real growth. I see. 52.3 million, something like that?
Right.
Great, thank you.
How am I doing, Brian?
You're doing
Okay.
You can have a drink of water, though.
Slow me down. So let's see. So the remaining pages, 49 through 52, are there other resolutions that will change as time goes by, and you make your changes to the budget. And again, at the last night, we'll have those new resolutions for you. You'll end up voting on those, and those will become the official budget. The next section is the general fund revenue and expenses, which start on page 53. So if you keep scrolling, you'll see the general fund revenue. And all revenue categories, and that totals $83.2 million. You can see down the bottom right-hand side. If you continue on page 54, under each category are the detail items within that category, and I'll stick to describing the major changes and notable. So property taxes. So you can see that line right at the top, property taxes, first line, single largest revenue item, that's $51.4 million. So that's what we collect in property taxes. Under intergovernmental revenue, you can find that. So go down a couple of categories, right, in the bold on the left. State line is $128,000. Fiscal year 25, the budget-to-budget increase of $3,000 in the clerk's office for the state checklist revenue. The revised budget and the projected budget for fiscal year 24 is higher due to additional $544,000 received for bridge aid. The city council transferred to the bridge aid reserve mainly to be used for Loudon Road Bridge. So if you look at the intergovernmental revenue, you can see that number increased there, and that's what it was for. So we took the money that came in from the state and you put it into a reserve account because you know you're going to need it for the match coming up for those bridge repairs. You also notice that that fiscal year 23, you can see that column, is $2.5 million. That's mostly due to one-time bridge aid received from the state in the amount of $2 million in that year. So any bridge aid money that you've been getting, you've been socking it away, recognizing the fact that Loudon Road Bridge project is $20+ million. Rooms and meals tax increased from the fiscal year 24 adopted budget by $314,000, and that occurred during the tax rate setting last year. The city used these additional funds to reduce the tax rate. So you remember, some of you may remember, when you actually looked at the tax rate last year, it was 4.8%, I believe, and you were able to drop it down to 4.2% because you used that additional revenue to reduce taxes. The budget for fiscal year 25 remains the same level as the 24 revised amount. The highway block grant revised and projected budgets for '24 is higher due to $7,000 that was reduced at tax rate setting time. 248,000 additional one-time highway payment received. Again, I mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting. We got additional money from the state, so that's reflected there. You'll also notice that in fiscal year '23 is 1.6 million, and that is due mostly to the one-time block grant that the city received in the amount of $741,000 that was used to increase the neighborhood paving program. Again, that additional money came in for the state, we put it right to work, and I think the next month, when the money came in, and got the pavement work done. Fiscal year '25, we're back to the $877,000, which is the normal level. On page 55, under licenses and permits, we're projecting construction permits to increase by $192,000 due to the increased construction activity in the community. You'll also notice that other permits are up $105,000 from fiscal year '24 to fiscal year '25. And this is a reclassification of the inspection fee line on the next page, which is down $100,000. So we're just really, in that piece, that one change, we're actually just changing the way we're categorizing the dollars. For investment income, we're increasing it by $940,000. We're projected at the end of year with investment income of about $2.3 million. You can see we now believe it'll be $2.6 million. So even if the interest rates ease slightly over the next 18 months, we should be able to achieve the $2.3 million number.
Councilor Brown.
Sorry, may I just go back to page 54? The court-ordered payments, did you cover that?
No, it's so minor that I didn't.
Okay. I was just curious why it dropped almost nothing.
Because the courts don't order people to pay us when people do wrong.
Oh.
I know, it burns me too. But, so when they do come in, they pay, it's usually, $50 here and $20 there. And
2023 was a busy year. I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of crime.
Plenty of mischief going on, but we didn't get a lot of money.
People coming out of COVID, they were having a lot of fun.
That's it. So I'll keep going.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, the transfers, investment, investment income. Okay, under transfers, we're on page 55. Under transfers and transfers from grants and donation, this is the last use. You see in '24, the last use of the ARPA funds, $900,000 for '25. You can see it goes to zero. At the bottom of 55, page 55, you see the use of fund balance. We're using $561,000 to help keep the tax rate at 3.89%, and this is up from $295,000 in fiscal year '24. Again, that's up to you about how much you'd like to use. This is again the starting point. City Council has done an exceptional job of managing the unassigned fund balance level each year. Works to achieve fund balance. If the balance decreases significantly, the rating agencies would be concerned at some point and may result in negative watch. So again, excuse me, you can use the dollars, but you just have to make sure that you're using them judiciously and make sure you don't use them a lot every single year. Otherwise, the rating agencies look and say, okay, you're not balancing, you're not.
Councilor Schlosser has a question.
So the 2024 revised use of fund balance is 3.6 or 7 million. That was due to unfilled vacancies, staff vacancies? Is that where that increase came from? The very
I see.
bottom.
Okay.
3.66.
Those are, Ryan, do you want to come up here? That one there's a couple complex pieces in this one.
So admittedly, the fund balance discussion is probably the most complicated discussion that we try to have. So if you think about, in the budget for 2024 was $295,000, and that was based on the decisions that the City Council made during the budget process. So that was to balance the FY24 budget. And then in the revised number, you see that number is $3,669,000. Why so much? So at the end of each year, we have this thing called surplus. And when the surplus, we close our books in the end of June, we go through all of our audit procedures, and then we get to sometime in the November, December timeframe. We come back to the City Council and say, okay, our surplus was X dollars. And we recommend allocating a certain amount of those dollars to transfer money to reserve accounts. This past year, we probably had the highest surplus that we've had since I was here, and that was a little over $3 million. I think it was $3.2 million. Of that, we allocated a bunch of money into the assigned fund balance, and then the city council authorized the transfer of funds from assigned fund balance to the reserve accounts. And that was over $2 million. That's a big portion of that $3.6 million. And then during the course of the fiscal year, as Mr. Manager already discussed, there were funds that were allocated for, the $305,000 for the fire department for the PFAS free equipment. There was the $385,000 for general services, a couple of other things. Those all added to that number for the revised budget, but that's simply a revised budget. And from an accounting point of view, we don't actually make a journal entry to actually allocate or show a revenue there. And then when we get to the 2025 number, we're really comparing that change to the 2024 adopted budget. And then, in December, this coming year, November, I anticipate that we'll come back to the council and say, this was our surplus or deficit based on the amount of dollars that we actually had allocated from fund balance, and this is what we think, or what we recommend that the city council transfer to reserve accounts to fund paving and equipment and all that other stuff again.
Councilor Shalster.
So we would probably bet that in December, we will have a reserve, we will have excess surplus because of the hiring situation, right? That's what drives that funding. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, in last year, in FY23, that was definitely, we had $2.4 million of unspent wages and benefits, and then we also collected additional revenues. That's why we ended up with a $3.2 million surplus. Do I think we're going to have that kind of surplus again this year? At this moment, I have to say, I do not think we will have that kind of surplus this year. With the amount of fund balance that we've actually have in here that's been allocated, I think we'll be good if we can break even, and not say that we had to use any of that surplus or any of that fund balance. I think that would be really good, but I would anticipate that we would have what I call a technical deficit because, we're not allocating this $3.6 million as revenue. It doesn't mean that we've overspent our budget. It just means that, we didn't collect enough extra revenue or underspent the rest of our budget in order to make up that full $3.6 million.
Great, thank you.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well said.
Thank you. This is the most complicated discussion in the whole budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then you want to go to page 56, and you can see motor vehicle registrations. The second largest, we talked about that when I did the charts. You can see under department service charges, inspection fees, we talked about that. And the ambulance service charges are up $700,000, and this reflects increased rates, but primarily increased activity. You added that fourth ambulance, and they're busy, you can see that reflected here on the dollars that are being collected by those ambulance calls. On page 57, if you go to under other revenue, under cable TV franchise revenue, this year is a budget for Comcast and Breezeline. We're kind of breaking those both out now. Both cable companies pay the city $52,500 each for capital infrastructure improvements and a percent added to the cable bills for the franchise fee. The total of these three lines is $738,000. This is a $96,000 reduction from fiscal year 24 since the franchise fee payments continue to drop as customers opt out of cable TV. People are going to the internet and to streaming, and we anticipated this occurring years ago, but it's really, you're starting to see that now, and you're starting to see these amounts go down. Under other, the last line in the section reflects a budget of $288,000, which is an increase of $220,000. This is due to revenue increase in Central New Hampshire hazmat reimbursement for overtime expenses associated with these services. We'll be talking about that number later. And then on page 58 shows the top 5 revenue producers in the budget, with the property taxes as number 1, motor vehicles 2. Remainder of this page in the top of page 59 are discussion of each of the revenues. These items make up 85% of all the general fund revenue. And at the bottom of 59, you can see the fund balance progression over 10 years, certainly a positive progression with the unassigned fund balance at 15.5 million or 22.4% of expenses, and then again, that's as of June 30, and that's changed since then. Is a number that the rating agencies will be continue to be concerned about if there's a significant reduction that could impact the city's bond rating. The last section for tonight is discussion, starts on page 60, the general fund summary of expenses, a total of 83.2 million, an increase of 4.8 million or 6.2%. On page 61, compensation benefits of the two first categories, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, represents $60.9 million. This is 73% of the total expenditures budget and is up $3.3 million over fiscal year 24. The next category is the outside services, and that's up $41,000 over fiscal year 25. So it's basically flat when you look at the size of that number. On page 62, supply categories is up $62,000, again, basically flat. Utilities categories up $142,000 due to electricity and natural gas cost increases. The city is under competitive cost contracts, which is still very favorable. We had such great electricity deals and gas deals that that's why you see this increase now back to what is the normal market. And this is reflective of a full year of a new contract pricing. And natural gas prices new natural gas prices go into effect in December of 24. So we'll have 7 months of that increased supply cost. Insurance and capital outlay categories are flat. Debt service is up 8%. As you can see, we've talked about that. On page 63, the miscellaneous category is up $141,000 or 15%. And you can see that's really the special program. So that number is really the human services costs. You see those there. Transfer out category is up $511,000 or 16%. This includes two large numbers, $306,000 transfer to solid waste to support the new costs under the solid waste contract. That contract is dramatically higher than what we've had for the last 10 years. So we're transferring money from the general fund to the solid waste fund to pay that cost. And then $205,000 transfer out of trust to paving. It's a combination of paving is $132,000 and technology reserve is $52,500. We're putting that technology reserve aside for eventually coming up relatively soon. We're going to have to start replacing the entire internet cabling system that we have, the fiber system that we have amongst all city buildings, and working with the school district on that. So you won't remember, 20 years ago, almost 25 years ago, we did a cabling network with the school districts and tied all our buildings together. It's coming time to replace that. So we're starting to try to set aside dollars to do that, because that'll probably be a $2 million project by the time we do that. Summary of expenses section provides a good overview of expenditures for all the general funds. Total wages and benefits, debt service, utilities, transfers is $74.4 million out of the $83.2 million, and that's 89% of the total budget. And page 64, last page of the section shows each of the categories that we just went over as a percentage of the total budget. So again, what Mayor Pro Tem was talking about in terms of compensation and fringe benefits, you can see debt service where we are with each one of those categories. And that, I'd be glad to take any questions before you go to a public hearing.
Any questions? Councilor Brown.
Thank you. Just looking at the compensation expense, is that factoring in filling current vacancies, or that's just,
We do position budgeting, so unless there's an item for attrition, which we'll call out, say, so there's a number in attrition, say for the police department as an example. There's a number in there where we don't think all those positions will be filled, so therefore why budget for all those positions? If we ever got to the unlikely occurrence that we needed to fill them, I'd come to you and say, it looks like we can fill all these police positions, I need to do something with these dollars, and I'd find the dollars for you to somehow to make that work. But we budget for all the positions, unless you see a specific line item that says attrition.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, on the retiree health, I see that adopted and revised are the same, which is great, but the projected is $2,943,000 for 2024, which we are not at the end yet. But then looking at budgeted for 2025, we are less than what we projected in 2024. Could you explain why?
Which, I'm sorry, what page are you on?
Retiree health on fridge.
Page 61.
61, oh, thank you. Fridge benefits.
Why it's down?
Yes, why did we, because if we project 2024 to be, that's almost 400,000 more,
300,000?
yeah.
Could you?
So in the city, we have a couple of different types of categories of retired employees. So we have some employees who were hired prior to, I think it was 1991, who have a good retiree health insurance coverage program. And then employees hired after that time period don't get a retiree health insurance program. So if you can picture that some of those employees, the city will pay the full premium for their health insurance from the time they're 62 to 65, and then when they turn 65, the city picks up the Medicare supplement portion of the insurance. So as employees age out, employees and their spouses age out at 65, the amount of dollars that we actually pay for that portion of employee goes down. So we have some new employees that are coming on, but some employees that are going down in the cost of the health insurance, and that's what that reflection is that the employees that are actually aging to 65, then they get the Medicare coverage.
So
the
every year,
supplemental
every
coverage.
year it changes up and down.
Right.
Follow-up.
A follow-up, it just, I don't know, it's a concern or it's what, because I think those people do owe us something, but to see 400,000 plus difference between 2024 and 2025, especially that you said we are picking up after 65 or 62. It's just my concern. For me, I think, it's below.
So it's got the amount of the cost has gone down.
Right.
Yes, correct.
Right.
And that's what,
And that's a concern?
no. I'm just asking why it's not, because if it seemed like we projected 2,491,000, and then we are projecting to go up to 2,943,000.
Right.
But then we are, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so but at the same time that you have those employees that are coming off the health insurance or they're grading down, you also have more new people who are retiring. Now, those new people that are retiring and they pick up the health insurance, those people have to pay the city for what they're picking up. So we show the expense part in this line, but if you go to the revenue page, you see a retiree health insurance line, and you can see, and I think when we get to the general overhead description, we'll describe that and say the revenue is going up about 50,000, even though the increase in the cost of the health insurance is going up $300,000 or $400,000. So it's not picking up all of it, but it's picking up a portion of it.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, I'm sorry,
And-
Councilor Brown?
and I'll add, would you believe that people don't necessarily tell you well in advance when they're going to retire?
Yes.
So you get to the end, so we're doing the budget now. So sometime in June, somebody may come to us and say, hey, I've decided to retire. Or anytime after that. And all of a sudden you don't know that and you can't budget for that because you don't know exactly when people are leaving.
Yeah, but
So-
if that come, that goes under the projected now, because 2024, we are not even to the middle of it yet. It's not June yet, but we already increased it to project that it will be more,
And it's an estimate of what we think is going to
Yes.
be, and, I don't know about you, but sometimes my estimates aren't always as good as what
No,
I'd like them to be, I do my best, but I don't always make the best
I
estimate.
was and maybe I misheard you, Counselor, but don't forget, we're talking fiscal years. So we're actually almost at the end of the fiscal year. Fiscal year ends on June 30th.
Right.
yes, but for the 2025,
Starts July
Yes.
1st
Jul-
of this year.
so, but what my question was, it just looking at what the adopted and the revised were the same, but now we are projecting to be at 943, which is 400,000 more of 400,000.
And the other part of that, too, is that we do have a health insurance increase.
52.
So the cost, there's a cost increase. For the city, it was a 10.5% cost increase, pretty
Now
much
that explains,
across the
okay.
board. So we have those additional costs. For the employees that are paying the difference, we see the difference in the revenue coming in the revenue side. For the employees that we're responsible for, the city is paying for those employees.
Thank you.
Okay. All set? All right.
I just have my,
Counselor Brown.
thank you. Just page 63 at the top, miscellaneous special programs. What does that entail, or what does that include?
I think the city manager said human services.
It's human services, okay. Is that,
Yes, special programs is that'd be everything from burials to rentals, and what else we got in there? I'm trying to remember what else.
We've got rentals, we've got medication.
Medications, things like that, for folks that Karen Evans Williams manages.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm happy to open the public hearing, but I think that everyone in the audience is a city employee. Mr. Walsh looks like he might want to come up and vent, or
There's no self-control.
he has no self-control. All right. At the fire department, does anybody want? No. Okay. Chief, all right.
I would open it anyways.
I will open this, and pourquoi?
To say that we opened it
All
and
right.
gave everybody opportunity.
I'll open the public hearing. Would anyone in the audience like to come and testify? Going once, going twice. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public hearing officially. All right, I will take a motion to go into non-public session.
So moved.
Moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those, Counselor Brown?
I'm leaving.
Right. You're recusing yourself
Yes, because I have a conflict.
because,
My husband is an employee.
thank you. So we're going to all those in favor of going into non-public session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We are going into non-public session.
Just